Hi there and welcome to the first class, Nuke 101. This is going to be an introduction to Nuke. We're going to be splitting this up in roughly 30-minute videos, give or take. We'll see how it goes so you can take a breather. Commonly, you should have a 10-minute break in between lessons. So if you need to, just pause the video and kind of take the time to breathe. This is going to be a very rough introduction. This program is immense, and it's a very immense program. It's the program that is used in all major motion pictures for compositing. And I just want to go over an introduction to the common file formats you'll be dealing with, especially as an independent filmmaker, being of low budget and so forth. I've worked on feature films and major TV commercials, and usually we work in many different formats. When it comes down to getting to the VFX people, we usually end up with a image sequence of DPXs, and we'll get into those as well. The camera equipment that we used for this was the Red production camera, the Blackmagic production camera. We also shot with the A6300, which is about $1,000 camera by Sony, and it's a really nice camera. So you're going to see a plethora of just file formats that are something you probably wouldn't see in After Effects, but you can get a really good idea of what to do with them and how to control them and so forth, and how each camera is a little bit different. And that's why I kind of stress so much in this class to understand cameras. As filmmakers, you're already ahead of the game on that, but to really understand cameras and the quality of what you shoot is going to really play a part in how you incorporate VFX, everything from green screening to tracking. These things are very important to be aware of. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to jump right into Nuke itself. Now, for those of you that don't have Nuke, there is a non-commercial version of this. If you go to the Foundry's website, and I'll have a link at the bottom for you. It is a non-commercial version. It's limited to renders of 1920 by 1080. So if you're going to do any experimentation with your footage, you probably want to kind of stay within that range. A lot of you like 4K, but you can easily shoot and practice in 1920 by 1080. This is a relatively expensive program. If you're a teacher like myself, you can actually get the education version of this, which is, I believe it's going for $250 to $200 US. And you get the fully functional version, which allows for exporting of cameras via the export right geo node. But again, it's a great, amazing program. The entire industry uses this, and it's something to definitely kind of start to jump into. People will just kind of stay in After Effects, and that's great and all, but you want to have a non-linear system for this. So again, you can come over here and you can get non-commercial. You have to register, and then they'll send you the license and so forth. So let's go ahead and jump right into Nuke and get started. So let me just go ahead and do that. So at first you could see this interface is very, it can be a little bit daunting. But it's a very simple interface. It's very similar to, say, After Effects and all that. You do have a lot of craziness up here, and also, you know, over here and so forth. So it's kind of understanding to kind of go through this one step at a time. And usually what I do in that case is I start bringing in files to take a look at. At first you might look at this and go, okay, where do I start with all this? Well, there are nodes up here. This is your toolbar. And you can start bringing in nodes. So you can bring in a checkerboard. So if you just click here and click checkerboard, you have a physical node in the shot. And this allows you to create multiple paths, something that's very hard to do inside of After Effects. It's a very nonlinear way of working. So I can also click up here and choose, let's try color bars. So now I have two nodes. And if I want to see the nodes in my display viewer here, I could just take the checkerboard here and on the alphanumeric keyboard, press 1. And then I'll take the color bars here and press 2. So all across your alphanumeric keyboard, not your numeric keyboard on the right if you have one, but your alphanumeric keyboard, you know, close to the escape key or whatever, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. So you can actually, if you want to, and everything inside of Nuke is dependent on where your actual cursor is at. So if my cursor is here in the viewer, and I type the numbers 1 and 2, you could see I'm going back and forth with this sort of highlight. Now, where's it going to? Well, it's going to a viewer node, you can see here. To maneuver around in Nuke, you use your middle mouse scroll wheel in the node graph. And then you can use your middle mouse scroll wheel will zoom in and out. Your middle mouse scroll wheel push down will move it left to right and up and down. And then you can also, if you want to, it's pretty much all the movement you have. So let's kind of go over a little understanding as far as the overview of everything. All your nodes are here. This is just like in After Effects if you were going to pull out a node. The beauty of Nuke is you don't have to go and search for these things. You can actually just use the quick kind of library key, which is Tab. So if your cursor is in the node graph, you can actually hit Tab and start typing in a node. So I'll make another color. I'll type in COL, and you can see I start to get a list of nodes. I could choose color wheel, so I'll choose color wheel this time, and I have a color wheel. Again, I could take the color wheel, and the input I don't have connected here is 3, so I'm going to go ahead and hit 3. And I have the color wheel in the actual scene. So if my cursor is in the node graph, I'm selecting what is the input. So I can take the color wheel and hit the number 1, color bars 2, and then the checkerboard 3. You can see the ordering is a little bit different now. Okay. If my cursor is now up in my viewer, I can type 1, 2, and 3. I can see the different options here. I'm going to switch over to the color bar, which is input 2. And you can see as I kind of scroll across the information here, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Your current setting size is down here, and we'll get into settings in a minute. And then your bounding box information is here. And channels, what channels do we have in here? Well, that's red, green, blue. So you can see here, I can kind of take a look through here. And I've got red, green, and blue. So the data is being delivered in red, green, and blue information, right? Values between 0 to 1, normalized values. So if you see I go to red here, you can see the value is 0.5, 0, and 0. If I go to blue here, it's 0, 0.5. This is commonly called absolute blue, absolute red, and over here would be absolute green, which is 0 for red, green 0.5, and then 0.0 for blue. You could also see an alpha input there, 0 as well. So that means that it's either opaque or transparent, and currently, if you take a look, if I hit A for alpha with my cursor here in the viewer, we switch. So here's the little pull down for that. And I could switch back by hitting A again. So I go from red, green, blue information to the alpha information. There is no alpha information. This is actually transparent to a certain degree. So again, you also have in here red, green, blue. You have red, green, blue. And these are all based on luminances between 0 to 1. Alpha, luminance, sort of like a black and white version of everything. And we'll talk about matte overlay in the future here. So this is basically it. It's very important to, as we kind of get further in here, I'm going to start to explain how the whole color science works as far as working in here. This is a 32-bit float area here in the node graph, and that's everything has to be converted to linear when it's in here, and then out converted to some logarithmic, like for instance Srgb. And again, we're going to get into all those terms in the next lesson, but I just want to have a basic introduction to Nuke as far as the interface itself. Okay. So there's many different channels here. You can pull down this. You can see we have RGB, RGBA, alpha, and all these fun little options here. We also have the alpha itself, which is being shown through, and that's the RGBA alpha. That's the main channel's alpha channel. So you also have red, green, blue. You can just, usually this stays the default RGB alpha, okay? There are many different channels you can have in here. Right now we have RGBA alpha. There's other possible layers. And this has to do with a lot of 3D stuff we're going to get into. Nuke was specifically designed to deal with 3D incorporation of live action CG. That's why it's mostly used in VFX for that very reason. It has a 3D interface inside of it. If you put your cursor over here into the little window here, which is your viewer, you can hit the tab button and you're immediately launched into this sort of 3D realm. And using your Alt key or Control key, you can start to see how you can move around. Now, we're not going to get into this just yet because this can get a little complicated, but I'm going to go ahead and hit the tab key and get out of this. If you want to get out of this back and forth, again, you can just hit your tab key. There's also this little button here to go back and forth. There's also other views in here, such as right, left, top, and bottom. So for instance, and that's your keys that are in your alpha keyboard bottom left, which is Z, X, and C. We're actually looking at top You see front, right side, top, and if we hold down Shift, we can choose Shift Z, Shift X, and Shift C, which is back, left side, and bottom. Again, C by itself is top, X by itself is right side, Z by itself is front. This is a 3D world. If you're not familiar with that, it's an XYZ space, or so it's something to kind of get used to. I'm going to go back to my 2D, which again is just the Tab key. And again, another hotkey for 3D is V. So you can see they kind of label all these nice hotkeys for you, which is kind of cool. So with that said, there are many other things we can do here. This is your display exposure and your display gamma. So you can, if you're wanting to see how things look a little darker, it's not affecting your image. It's just like basically darkening your image, and you can click this little red here, and that'll bring you back to your default. So I can brighten it up and bring it down. This is affecting the gamma. Again, we're going to get into color correction nodes and how they all work. Then you have exposure, which is right here. So exposure, you can see I can bring up and down, and it just changes the exposure. So it's a multiplication type operation. And everything inside of this is basic math, okay? So with that said, we can see there's a couple other options here. There's this option called Srgb. That's the display viewer. If we turn it off, we're actually looking at what's considered to be linear space, or what's in the node graph. We're going to eventually output this stuff to Srgb because we're outputting towards a computer screen. If we were going to go for a HD television, we'd go with Rec 709. And there's many other LUTs, lookup tables we'll get into for final output. We're not going to get too complicated with that right now and understanding. We're just going to go ahead and leave it at Srgb, and I'll explain that later. There's also this little option here that you can do a quick little swipe with this, a comparison between two inputs. So you can see I have inputs set to 1, 2, and 3 here, checkerboard, you know, color bars and color wheel here. What I can do is I can go ahead and click and do a wipe. Okay, and now I have under or over. You can see under or over. I'll just put under. And I have this little white bar, which I can actually rotate and move up and down and expose one side to the other, and use this little fade bar to go back and forth, which is kind of cool. Sometimes you want to compare earlier renders with new renders or color correction changes to previous changes, and we'll kind of get into that in a little bit later. Okay, so I'm kind of going down the chain here a little bit. You have the safe zones. You can commonly do things like title safe. We don't really worry about title safe too much since we don't deal with the bowed screens too much. Sometimes TVs can chew away at the sides of the screen, so you don't want to have any lettering cut off, so you can kind of look at that. Clip warning for overexposure. You can go ahead and say, you know, exposure and turn that on, and then you should be able to see a warning here when this kind of pops up. I'll just turn it to no warnings for now. Right here you have something called the toggle proxy mode. You can go ahead and click this, and you can see the resolution is going to get a little lower. Actually, it's you can't tell because this is like perfect image right now. But if I switch over to my color wheel, which is input 1, I'll put my cursor over here in front of the viewer and type 1 on my alphanumeric keyboard. And as I come to the edge here, you can see the pixels if I zoom in really close with my middle mouse scroll wheel. And as I start to lower the resolution here, I'll go ahead and turn on the toggle resolution button here. So this is the proxy mode. Sometimes you need to kind of like lower the resolution when you're working and doing color correction fixes because it'll bog down your system. So this is one way of doing this. This is about 50% loss of resolution in here. You can see a change. If I want to change what is my proxy mode, I can put my cursor over here under the node graph and hit the letter S for settings. And under my properties bin, which is this thing over here, I can go ahead and start to change what is my proxy scale, which is right here. So I can put this to something like, you know, 0.1 or 10%, and now it's super low res. So if I turn that on and off, it's pretty bad. And again, I could increase this to maybe 75% or 0.75. I'm getting a little bit less resolution, but I can still see pretty defined lines and so forth. Now, I'm going to go ahead and turn that off for now. Properties bin is interesting. If I have a series of nodes in here, I could scroll up and down, and here they are. So here's the checkerboard. If I go ahead and put my viewer to the checkerboard by putting my cursor over here and hitting the number 3, you can see it here. I can change up things such attributes such as the size of the checkerboard. And by the way, if you ever want to frame anything up, you can hit the letter H, which will frame it top to bottom. or you can hit F to frame it, which will give you a little bit of space here. Again, your cursor has to be in the viewer to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and put my size. You can see I can change the size of the checkerboards. I can go over here and clip these little color wheels and start to change the color of the specific squares and so forth, and blah, blah, blah. So, so there's all these attributes in here. I don't usually like having my properties bin more than 2 on here because it's listing a ton of nodes. And sometimes I'll have multiple nodes that are the same name and I don't want to see that. So usually I start by putting my viewer to 1, maybe 2 in the future if I need to, but that means only one thing will be up here at a time. So if I click on my color bars, it's there, my checkerboard, my color wheels, my color bars, you can see it's just one thing. If I put this to 3, as I click on here, it's going to start adding all the nodes, which is a pain because I'm like a ton of things in here and I don't want to see all that. I'm a very picky guy on that. So you can see right here, the color wheel itself, I can say edge saturation, center value, and again, I got to put my viewer to this. And just change stuff like that. Edge saturation, and blah, blah, blah. So with all that said, let's kind of keep going down the line here. We do have this option here we're going to get into, which has to do with regions of interest and pause button and so forth. You also be aware there is a downres option, which is just like what we showed here with the proxy mode. I can actually downres this to, say, half the resolution, quarter of the resolution, 1/32 of the resolution. So look how low res that is, but it's going to give me faster feedback. Now, if I take this and I can actually compound it with the addition of whatever I have in my proxy mode, so it's even more lower resolution. So I'm going to put this back to 1:1. Usually you're switching between 1:2 or 2:1 here. Okay. And that's pretty much it. There is a refresh in here in case something doesn't work, and then there's a pause. So if I hit pause and I start playing around with this, it's going to pause the screen. If you ever have any issues where you can't see things in your viewer, this will happen to you if you're a brand new Nuke user. You'll be like, it's not showing up in the viewer. Well, make sure there's no weird buttons on here, like for instance, that you don't see anything in red up here. So if you got your exposure up high or low, it could be a black screen. I can't see anything. Oh, it's because I need to turn this off, turn this on, and it's updated. So look for red crap up here. Just giving you a warning. Okay. And then you have a dabber where you can dab colors and so forth. So it's a very simplistic setup. You do have a animation graph. Anything in green means it's cached. So you can go into your preferences and change the amount of cache you want. I would highly recommend getting a lot of memory if you're going to be using Nuke. And you'll be able to cache this out and play it in real time. So we'll get into that as we get to look at our footage. So with that, we also have this little a couple options in here. And I think I'm going to wait on showing you guys this stuff until we get into the footage because there's nothing here except still images that we're kind of dealing with. So we'll get into the fun of the time slider and so forth. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and start to make some additional nodes and show you what is the beauty of nonlinear workflow inside of Nuke. So if I take any one of these nodes, I can add nodes over here, and the common nodes you will commonly see is, for instance, a grade node, and usually it could be any one of these. These are color correction nodes. So if I take this and hit G for grade, I have a grade node. And I can take the grade node and take the gain and bring it up and down. You can see nothing's happening here. If I take a look at it, that's because my viewer is not set to the color bars. So if I put my viewer to the color bars by clicking the color bars node and hitting number 1, now I can see it, but I can see the color correction hasn't occurred yet. You have to move this down the pipeline. So I'm going to take my viewer and put it to the grab the grade 1 node and hit number 1. And now you can see the color correct change. So you can see I can now take the gain, bring it down, change the black point, the white point, and the gamma, and we'll get into all these options in the next video as we kind of go through this. But just be aware that you can add another grade node, or you can, for instance, I'll do, say, let's do a sharpening node. So I'll take my grade node, hit tab, and type sharpen. And the beauty of selecting the node beforehand is it'll come down the pipe like that. If you wish to remove a node, you can disconnect it like that, and then reconnect it. Or you can go ahead and take a node and hold down Shift Control X if you're on a PC, or Shift Command X if you're on a Mac. And that will actually pull out your grade node. It's a lot easier than doing this. Okay, I got it out. All right, I hook this up. You know what I mean? It's a lot easier. So I'll go ahead and take a look. Here's the Sharpen. And I don't think I'm going to use a color wheel. I'm going to plug in a color bars. I'm going to plug in my color wheel again. You can see the pipe here coming down and going to my viewer. My viewer is set to 1. If I put my cursor up here and type 1, that's what I'm looking at. I can come to my Sharpen, and I can start to sharpen the daylight side of the image, which is going to give me a really crunchy edge, like you see here. And if I want to disable the node, I can hover over the node, select it, and hit the letter D. You'll get this nice X over it. So that'll disable and re-enable. Here's the grade node. Disable, re-enable. And you can grab all nodes at once, hit D, disable, re-enable. D is beautiful. You can see the before and afters. You can also set your viewer to the starting point. I'll put this to 1, and I'll grab my Sharpen and set this to 2. And what you see now is if I just hover over here, hit 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, or I can hit this as 1, 2, and 3, and now if I hover over my thing here, I go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You can see I'm viewing the progression of the color grading and then the sharpening, which is really cool. So it's a pretty simple interface when you get into it. There's also a curve editor. This has to do with animation, and we'll get into that, and the dope sheet, which is sort of single, not so much about the interpolation of the keys, but where the keys are at in time. Whereas the curve editor has to deal with the interpolation to the keys. If it's a ease in or ease out, a movement that starts off slow and increases in speed, you have to adjust that in the curve editor. Whereas the dope sheet is just single key frames for animation or whatever you want. It could be anything. So let's be aware of that. With that said, I think I'm going to hold off until the next lesson, from which we're going to actually bring in the footage. It's important that you actually get the actual file folder for this class, which will contain all of the elements, and you can download that off of the website. And in doing so, we will be able to go through these files, and I'll introduce you to common industry files that you'll use. And again, it'll be a great opportunity for you to kind of get a feel for what is used in the industry. We haven't talked about color space yet. We haven't talked about grading yet, or color correction terms and anything like that. So I want to cover all that. And I also want to eventually do a tutorial on color correction, just so you get an idea as far as the basics if you're just kind of jumping into this. The whole process, again, is to understand Nuke and then get you through. I'm not going to show you all the fun, crazy tools of Nuke. I want to get you towards live action CG compositing. It's sort of a, here's the hedge maze, and we're moving towards this without having to show you, oh, look, you can do this. Oh, look, you can do that. How about just going straight for what you guys are looking to do, which is, incorporating VFX in your work, or maybe some clean plating and so forth, and maybe some green screen stuff. So with that said, I'll see you on the next section of Nuke 101.